Hey everybody, this is Tom Hagan, and my presentation is on virtual K-8 schools and if they're a possible future of education for us teachers. Before I get started, I want to give a brief introduction on how this topic interested me. At the beginning of the summer, I saw a lot of commercials for the Pennsylvania Connections Academy, and what really caught my eye was that they were offering classes for K through 9. And I thought to myself, how can 5 and 6-year-olds learn online when they don't even know what a classroom is, what a basic environment for learning is. And even middle schoolers, I teach middle schoolers all the time, and I know how short their attention span is. So how is that going to work in online where it's all on them, it's all on the student to be responsible? So what I wanted to research first was, what's the definition of a virtual school? And so what I found is that a virtual school is a school where part or all of the students' classes are done online. And when part of the school is done in a traditional brick and mortar building and part is done online, that's what's called a blended school. And the amount of time that students take in both of those environments can vary greatly, differing on the school. And I also found that there's the entire gamut of types of schools within the virtual school environment. There's public, charter, private, for-profit, non-profit, just about anything you can imagine in terms of a virtual school. In terms of how they work, students, just like in normal elementary and middle school, take all your usual classes: language arts, science, social studies, etc. And just like a normal school, those students get the books and materials that they need. So the only difference is, instead of getting them the first day and putting them in your backpack, you get them shipped to you. And that includes materials for labs, workbooks, textbooks, digital ebooks, everything they need. Students work independently through online activities and text-based activities in books, and also through direct instruction online, through video chats and screen shares with the teacher and with other students. What I did find is that depending on the setup of the school, those activities can vary greatly in their occurrence. So for instance, Karen Lirriman teaches in a school in British Columbia where 4 days are in the terrestrial brick and mortar school and 1 day is at home. And so she, in her class, has makerspace activities and allows the students to do a lot of choice and work on what they want to do. And then at home, on that 5th day, they reinforce that through home activities. But with Ashley Fryer, who teaches in Kansas in a totally virtual school, hers are a little bit more what you would think of when you hear a science class, because she's a science teacher. She does labs, and the students input data and take tests, a little bit more similar to your middle school science class. And just like every class, there's a variety of assessments and activities, again, depending on the type of school. And this is what's interesting, is that in an online or a virtual school, students receive lessons and activities tailored to their needs. So they take a couple of tests at the beginning of the year to figure out where they sort of lay on the spectrum, and then they get activities to work on their needs. Lessons are driven by the same standards as traditional brick and mortar schools in the area. But unlike traditional brick and mortar schools, parents play even a larger role in the supervision and motivation of the students. Not that they don't in traditional schools. We know that sometimes parents can make a huge difference, but in a virtual environment, they're the facilitator. They're to make sure, did you do your lesson for science today? It's a little bit more involved. And also students take just state tests and benchmark tests just like they do in a traditional school. So let's move on to the positives of virtual and blended schools. One of the big things is that they can provide a new educational environment for a wide range of students. For students who have a chronic illness who couldn't attend school regularly, or students who are bullied and who are afraid to attend school, virtual schools give them an environment where they can learn from the safety of their own home. For military families and other traveling families, students don't have to always deal with the repercussions of moving, at least right away. They can finish off the school year in their virtual school into the community that they started. And also for athletes and musicians and performers who have different schedules or who have practices, this provides an opportunity for them to do school more at their own pace. And also individualize lessons to help accelerate gifted students and help bring struggling students back up to grade level. I talked to Suzanne Conway, who teaches in a virtual school in Washington, D.C., and she loved that her gifted students were able to excel and her struggling students were able to get brought back up to grade level, all through tailoring their activities and lessons. Students can take subjects that aren't offered in local school districts, for instance, languages or maybe art classes or music classes. And in fact, there's even academies now popping up just for those. For instance, there's the Carmenta Latin School, where students can take Latin and Greek from an early age online. And on top of that, students get an early start prepping for college and the real world. They could take online classes in elementary and middle school. They definitely can take online classes in college. And on top of that, in the future business world, working with people digitally, video conferencing, those are all things that are important and that are going to be important in the future. Additionally, these virtual schools allow for more choice of school. Parents and families aren't handcuffed to the school district that they live in, which means if a parent thinks that the school district they're assigned won't help their child and a virtual school may, they have that choice. And additionally, public virtual schools are tuition free because they're offered only to residents of the state or county, similar to how a public school brick and mortar works. Now on to the negatives. There's concerns over socialization and screen time. When are students who are online all the time for school going to be able to socialize in person with people? In addition, how much is too much screen time? On top of that, there's an increased demand on the parent and the home environment in a virtual and blended school. And even Karen Lerman, who has one day at home, said it was tough to design effective home activities. Additionally, are funds from schools that need it, like inner city schools, being given to these online charter schools when the inner city schools really could need it? And finally, how do we know the work is getting done by the student? If you look at the phys ed requirements for virtual academies, a lot of times they'll say, oh, well, the students send us measurements every once in a while on things that they can do, and that gives them the grade. Well, how do we know they actually did them? The big negative is some studies that came out recently that show that virtual schools are performing nowhere near traditional schools in terms of graduation rates and test scores. We're talking significantly worse than traditional schools. On top of that, class sizes can sometimes reach the triple digits in elementary and middle school included. And the One Credo 2015 study shows that students who return to traditional schools actually do better than students who stay in virtual schools. People have fired back at the critics with these answers. When it comes to those studies, they say that the data is very incomplete, which is true. If you look at the appendices of these studies, you'll find a lot of gaps in the tables, just because it's tough to find information. So they make these judgments based on incomplete data. They argue that students socialize through clubs and after-school activities that they can still participate in part of their district, and of course digitally as well. In terms of screen time, they would argue that workbook time and hands-on lab time takes away from time in front of the screen. And just like normal schools, these schools have an academic honesty policy. So if a student is found to be cheating or lying, there are consequences. Looking towards the future, in my opinion, the jury is still out on virtual schools. Yes, the data is bad, but it's very incomplete. And I think we need better studies before we make a full judgment. And I still think there are benefits of parts of virtual schools, which is why I think that blended schools may be the solution. You can combine the best of both worlds. So for instance, one school could have virtual schools on snow days to help ease the pain of making up days. Or if a school couldn't afford a teacher for a certain class, you could take that class online. Each school can mix and match whatever they need. But are virtual schools the future for everyone? No. I love it for students who are sick or bullied or travel, but I don't think it's for everyone. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and check out my Flipboard for more information. Thanks again.